So with 32,000 species of fish around the world being eaten, it's really easy to see how the fishing industry and fish in general have helped develop humans throughout the years and has been a sustainable food source for us. But with the addition of new technology, the fishing industry has become more effective, but in return, it's also become more destructive. So for those of you that don't eat fish, this is still a very relevant issue because the ocean is basically the lungs of the world. And, as seen with smoking as well, if you just start to damage those lungs by overfishing or destroying natural resources, the whole planet will start to die. So what exactly is the problem that's harming our oceans now? Well, it's trawling. Trawling is a destructive but very effective fishing habit that is destroying seabeds and causing overfishing throughout the world. So what exactly is trawling? Well, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration defines trawling as a fishing practice that herds and captures target species by towing a net along the ocean floor. OSHA adds to this definition by explaining how the net's kept open by these large weighted doors and the foot trope is pulled along the ocean bottom. So if you've ever seen Finding Nemo, at the end scene, the nets that all the fish are being brought up in, that's trawling. And so what exactly is the problem with trawling? Well, according to a research in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences of the United States of America, the 4 different trawls that are used do different effects of penetration of the seabed and overall will grab a different total biomass. So for otter trawls, the bottom one here, they penetrate the seabed 2.5 centimeters on average and will grab about 6% of the total biomass. Where on the other side of the spectrum, hydraulic dredges will penetrate the seabed 16.1 centimeters and grab about 41% of the total biomass. Now, once that biomass is swept up onto the boats, it will not return back to its original place. And to recover, the ocean has to spend 1.9 to 6.4 years building back up the resources. So any coral that's ripped out of the ground, shellfish, crabs, eels, octopi, any of those animals that aren't target species are also swept up and will not return. So another issue is bycatch. So according to the Marine Population Bulletin, shrimp trawling, which is one of the most devastating, catches only 2% of the world's total fish intake, but accounts for 1/3 of the entire bycatch. So that's about 1 shrimp to 3 bycatch, or on the extreme sides, 1 shrimp to 15 bycatch. Now, according to OSHA again, the worldwide total sum of bycatch is 63 million pounds. And so basically, if those numbers are kind of hard to grasp, so picture it this way. If you wanted to go pick apples, instead of just walking up to the tree and just grabbing an apple, you got a bulldozer and totally just wiped out the entire orchard. Sure, now you have a lot of apples, but not all of them are ripe. You also have the entire tree, branches, leaves, insects, other animals that could be there, your topsoil. So now it's going to take nature years and years to bring back that orchard. And next year, when you go for more, it's not going to be there. And so instead, you're just going to go plow down another orchard. That's what trawling is doing to these oceans. So with all these devastating effects, why isn't anything really being done? Well, the main reason, of course, is always money and the effectiveness of trawling. So according to NPR, in 1950 to 2015, deepwater trawling caught 14 million tons of fish. That is a lot of fish to feed the world. And according to NOAA, just in the United States in 2017, from commercial and recreational fishing, it supplied 1.74 million jobs and made up to $244.1 billion. Now, for a lot of people, that's their livelihood, and it's really hard to argue with those numbers. Plus, there are a few things being done. There are BRDs, or bycatch reduction devices. And so on the right here, you see there's a few different examples of BRDs. The most famous is being turtle exclusion devices, so little nets in the bottom that'll let turtles escape. But according to a research article in Biological Conservation, BRDs are about 40% effective. So they'll decrease bycatch mainly for fish trawling. They tried the one on the bottom here, example E, where it's the square mesh with the long funnel. Those reduced bycatch by 40%. And they also reduced juveniles caught by 81%, which is wonderful numbers. But they also decreased the amount of shrimp caught by 7%. And an already $244 billion industry, that's a lot of money lost. A research article in Fisheries Research from Australia found that bycatch reduction devices in their shrimps had a 0 to 39% chance reduction. So even with them implemented, there's a 0% reduction rate in some of their devices. So bycatch reduction devices aren't doing a good enough job to make up for the amount of destruction caused by trawls. And so with the 44% reduction, right, the 40% reduction in the 1/3, that's still 8 million pounds of bycatch caught annually just in the shrimp industry. So what exactly can we do? Well, we can support businesses that don't use trawling. The Monterey Bay Aquarium Seafood Watch is a really good resource to find out which fish we should support and which ones we should avoid for the time being, either because they're overfished or they're dangerous or their population's right on the brink. And so they do all the extensive research of which fish we should be buying, which fish we should be avoiding. And so we can also support legislation that mandates bycatch reduction devices in all of their nets, or even supporting businesses that use different examples like long line casting, more devices that exclude bycatch. I know it's going to be difficult to do, but also avoiding different foods that are only caught by trawling, such as shrimp. It's a hard one to do, but every little bit counts. So are there any questions?
Yes, I got a question for you.
Yes, Ryan?
So regarding the fish, everything they catch in trolling, what happens with the fish or shrimp, whatever kind of animal that they have that they weren't intended to catch? Do they just throw them away? Do they also just, sell them, or what happens with them?
So that's a really good question. I'm going to refer back to this slide. So for any species that's caught that's not the target species, like shrimp, as seen in the image, they're just dumped back into the ocean. There's little ports on the side where you can just shovel all the non-target species back into the ocean. The problem is most of them at this point are already dead due to either being crushed in the nets or lack of oxygen if they're a mammal. So they are not sold because a lot of the bycatch, if they make it back to shore with it, they can actually get fined. And so these large companies, to avoid that, they just shovel it right off the boat.
Thank you. That was really informative. Thank you.
Are there any other questions?
Yeah, I had a question.
Yes.
Do you think that so some of these bycatch reduction nets, that you said some of them had a 0 to 39% reduction in shrimp catch. So, but on average it was around 7 or so, which is still like large numbers in $1 billion industry. But do you think with a 7% reduction in shrimp catch, with a 40% reduction in bycatch, you think all the time that like shoveling the bycatch out and like all that would make a difference in like productivity? Maybe it would make up for some of that percentage.
Yeah, so that's a really good point you brought up. The 7% doesn't seem like a very large number compared to the 40% reduced bycatch. But for these industries, since you can only make money on the sold product, a decrease in the amount of product you're catching each time is kind of a large pull on the amount of time spent just pushing things off the boat, because they're not paid by hour, they're paid by how much they can catch. And so if they can't catch as much, then to them it's not really an incentive to implement these devices. But for the public, it's more of an incentive. And so that's why with that reduction of bycatch, if the public, if each of us goes out and starts to petition and write to legislative officials that, hey, look, this is a big difference to the bycatch, and I know there might be a reduction in the amount of catches, but overall throughout the years it's more important to protect the other species. So for us, it's more of an incentive to go out and do stuff, but for these businesses, that 7% is millions of dollars lost to them. Alrighty, any other final questions?
Yeah, I think I have one more.
Go ahead.
So you said it takes about 6 years for the ocean floors, or 7 years for the ocean floors to grow back, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that the ocean is vast enough with the amount of trawling that they could just trawl in different places and then the first place they trawled at would grow back after 6 years, or you don't think it's big enough?
So unfortunately, it is not big enough because of the different locations of target species. It's not like shrimp live throughout the world. There's certain pockets of where they live, and so they can only trawl in those different areas. Like, so I found an article in Maine Public about the small family shrimping industry, how they only have like 25 workers. They're only allowed to trawl in a certain area, right? Because of international water laws, different countries owning different parts of the oceans. For small businesses, they can only trawl in certain areas. And so because they can only use that area, it doesn't give the ocean enough time to replenish. And on the large end, the 6 years it takes for it to come back, that's only to the point of when they first trawled it. And with growing populations, they're going to need more than when they first did 6 years ago. And so it's just not enough time for the ocean to try and recover. Alrighty. Thank you all for listening. Enjoy the rest of your day.